Welcome to the Queer Spirit Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Venegoni. Here we have conversations with artists, healers, and activists who enliven the LGBTQ communities and who empower our queer spirits to flourish. My guest today is Justin Sayre. Justin is a writer and performer best known for his downtown cabaret variety show, The Meeting. Sayre has been described by Michael Musto in The Village Voice as Oscar Wilde meets Whoopi Goldberg. Splitting his time between New York and Los Angeles, Sayre has written on the CBS sitcom Two Broke Girls, and he also appeared opposite Lisa Kudrow on HBO's The Comeback. Today, Justin talks about how The Meeting first came into existence and bringing folks together to have a laugh while talking about what's important in the queer community. Justin also shares about their upcoming book, Gay BCs, which is a dictionary of gay culture, and we discuss the importance of recording queer history. To learn more, visit justinsayre.com. That's Justin, SAYRE.com. Hi, Justin. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So I know that The Meeting is starting up again after a couple years hiatus, and I thought I would have you tell us the story a little bit about how The Meeting came into existence.
Well, The Meeting came about now 10 years ago, really. I'd been an actor in New York for many years, and I had gotten to a place where things were really starting to happen. I was kind of on the cusp of really taking my career to the next place. And I had a series of auditions that were going to hopefully lead to a job where, they were all big jobs. And I was into final callbacks for my first Broadway show, a big tour, and an off-Broadway revival of a play that I cared very deeply about. And one by one, I was in the last callbacks and didn't get them. And I was kind of bereft. So I decided that I was not going to be an actor anymore, and I was going to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I went to a radical fairy retreat in upstate Vermont. And while I was there, I kind of had this idea about a show about community. And I kind of pitched it to a few friends who were new friends who I'd just met. I said, oh, would you ever come to like a variety show if it was about this? And came up with the whole premise, I think, my first weekend. And then called. When I got back after the summer, I ended up spending a lot of the summer up there. When I got back at the end of the summer, I called the duplex in New York on Christopher Street and said, listen, I want 2 dates. I want to start a monthly show, and I'm going to try it. And if you hate it, and the 2 dates, I'll just take the 2 dates. And if it's bad, I'll never darken your door again. But if it's good, I want you to sign me to a monthly deal. And after the first show, they did. They really liked it. They liked what the premise of it was. And so we were at the duplex for about 3 years. Then we moved up and it just kept growing and having momentum. And we started putting videos from the show out online. And after the duplex, we moved up to 54 Below for about 6 months, and then moved back downtown to Joe's Pub, where we've been ever since. About 2 years ago, after I had moved to Los Angeles, because I'd gotten a job writing for television very randomly from a sketch that had been put out by The Meeting that I had written and I had performed, and went to LA to write for television. And then the commute became a lot in the first year, back and forth every month. So I started finally I decided that The Meeting had run its course and we were going to be done. I did a series of shows at Joe's over the next 2 years, and now we're back because I felt like this is the time, with all the turmoil going on, that this would be a good time to kind of have a show about community, have a show about queer visibility, and bring it back for a limited run.
So it's just going to be a brief time or a few shows?
I think it's going to be all of 2020, and then we will figure it out again.
Got it. Okay. So you've mentioned a couple times in describing it, it's a show about community, and I'm wondering what your thoughts were in the origin of creating it about community and what your intention was.
Well, there were a few thoughts. I mean, the show is derived around an idea of community. So the premise of the show is that it's a secret meeting of the International Order of Sodomites, which is this secret gay organization that runs things, and this is their meeting. And through that, we kind of we discuss political issues, social issues, pop culture, all things that kind of come out of and are affected by the gay community. And I use gay and queer interchangeably. My audience is largely gay male people, but we have a lot of trans people. We talk about trans issues. We have a lot of trans artists, participating in it. I try to really make it a show about inclusivity. And what it came out of was my need, especially, 10 years ago, we're talking about things like Prop 8 happening, and being somebody who had been very interested in the politics of, queer liberation and queer representation, but not having a platform and not really seeing people coming together and talking about it. I was, 10 years ago, I think it's softened a bit now in some respects, but 10 years ago, there was a huge discussion about how a younger generation was not communicating with an older generation, that there were the scars of the AIDS crisis had just divided us so deeply. And I felt like if you brought people together to talk about Diana Ross rather than about how they're different, you were having an entryway into sparking different kinds of conversations, that people could start to come together in joy over the celebration of something they all loved. And that would inherently put them on the same side, rather than, telling young people what they don't know and old people what they're not hip enough to catch up to. And I think starting from that place was a gift that we were able to kind of live in this space of we're just talking about light things and then really go to dark places. I think that's always been the gift of the show. And community kind of sprang up very quickly. People would buy tickets for 6 months. They would come to every show. They would, meet people there and see people, the same audience would come back. So from the very beginning, there was not only a community around the show, but the show was participating with a community that was already there, that felt underserviced.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely recognized those aspects. I've never been to the show in New York, but I live in San Francisco, and I first discovered you through the clips on YouTube, and then have been to the couple performances you did here in San Francisco.
Sure.
And I also noticed that the way that you initially start out bringing in humor, but then you start to talk about more serious subjects with a humorous slant, and sometimes they may be challenging or unpopular ideas, but because you get people laughing, sort of opens up their mind, it opens up their heart to actually really think about it and consider, oh, maybe I should actually be thinking about this more seriously, or maybe I should be thinking about this in a different way.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's one of the big goals always, is how do you participate with, I go into a show, any of these shows, and see that the audience is inherently on my side, that we have a lot more in common than we probably don't. Even if I don't know you, even if you've never come to one before, I would imagine that the sensibility that's drawn you to the show is probably more similar to mine than disparate. However, I have my own ideas, and you're there to participate with me, and we can disagree. But I'm trying to give you a sample of what kind of radical compassion and radical love look like for an hour and a half. And sometimes that's uncomfortable. Sometimes you have to go places you didn't want to go. Hopefully the audience feels with me very quickly that they're in a place of safety, that they're not, even if we do go to a dark place, we're going to bring it back up. There's going to be another laugh. It's not the end of the world. It's really just a dark place right now. And I feel like I've earned that trust with an audience. And it's also allowed me, one of the things that I'm most proudest of in all the years that we did the meeting and continue to do it now, probably in the last year, there was a controversy. 54 Below had a concert for Black Lives Matter had been scheduled for 54 Below. And the owners, reading the Black Lives Matter kind of mission statement, had seen that the organization had made some remarks concerning a free Palestine and a solidarity with the Palestinian people, and decided to cancel the concert outright. And I had known some people who were involved in the concert, and I called them and I said, listen, I have a sold out audience at Joe's Pub in 2 days. I said, I will cancel my guests and give you guys the night. Bring everybody down. And they were overwhelmed and they were very surprised. And I said, but, my community is your community. There are people of color under that LGBTQ umbrella. And to not talk about these issues is not what this show is about. And they came down and my audience was primarily white, was different. And I had to say to them, you're in a safe space. This is about expressing what's going on to members of your community, whether you see them or not. And this is a time to come together. And it was incredibly moving. And people had an amazing time. And because we had laid the groundwork of that kind of safety and we're going to go to dark places, but allow you to rejoice at the same time, I think we were really able to do something like that, to be effective in that way.
How did the audience respond to that? I mean, I imagine the audience just showed up not knowing that was going to happen, right?
We announced a few days before. So, it was done very, very quickly. I called the wonderful people at the Public who were very supportive of the move. And, but they were, I went out in the first minutes and talked to everybody and just said, hey, this is part of the conversation. This is part of what we're doing here. That having come here all these times, we've done other charitable things. We've talked about other issues. We've registered people to vote for, we've done everything at these things. So why wouldn't we participate in this? And for the most part, people were really moved. People were really, really moved. And people were genuinely, I had a lot of older activists who were there, people who have been in activism since, Stonewall and beyond. And they were incredibly grateful to see the intersectionality that, that they had experienced as part of the 70s, but had, fallen apart, but that it was still possible. It was really an amazing night. I'm always proud that we did that.
I also imagine it was pretty healing bringing those two communities together where there's a little bit of an overlap, but there also can be a little bit of, some tension, especially the way that homosexuality has had some challenging experiences within the Black community as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think there is even gay culture. Having worked on a book about gay culture, it is so much of what is recorded is the hopes and wishes and desires of white gay men. They've really set the agenda for a long time. And they're not the only ones making it. In fact, there's a lot of people making it and a lot of people involved in the making of LGBTQ culture. And a lot of those people are of color. A lot of those people are Black and Latino. And, that's the community I'm interested in. Not just them, but how do we all come together? How do we stand up for each other? How do we not, it is very easy for white gay men, I think, to kind of, and I say this as knowing that it's a total generalization, but I think it's very easy for white gay men in this country, even gay, certainly gay white men, but it's very easy for those men to forget the privilege that they have. And privilege isn't about guilt. Privilege isn't about, it's not about any of these. You don't have to feel bad about the privilege. You just have to acknowledge it. And you have to be sensitive. And it's not about, taking, everybody always talks about these kind of seats at the table. And my thought is, it's not about losing seats at the table. It's about getting out the leaf, making the table a little bigger, and adding some chairs. That's what you would do if people were in your home. That's what we have to do as a community. We just have to make space so that everybody gets their needs met.
When the distant relatives decided to show up at Thanksgiving and you're like, oh, gotta make more room.
Absolutely. You would just make more room. And that's, I think, moving forward, that's how we have to look at all these issues. And I bring it up in the show quite a bit, female reproductive rights are a queer issue, access to abortion, access to Planned Parenthood are queer issues. Elder care is a queer issue, all those things. We are a motley crew. We got everybody. And we have to take on issues that affect our community. And those issues are profound and deep and affect lots of people who look lots of different ways. And we have to remember that that is our strength and not a detriment to us at all. It is really this great kind of clarity moment.
Yeah. And I also just want to go back to share something that is part of my philosophy, what you were saying about privilege, which is that if it's gay white men or anyone who has any kind of privilege, I think it's important to recognize that just because one has privilege doesn't mean that it also cannot coexist with lack of privilege.
Oh, absolutely.
Or trauma or something like that. And I think that sometimes people hear privilege as like, there's nothing wrong with you.
Oh, no.
But it doesn't mean that. It means that there's a certain way that you have a footing up, even though in other ways you may have a footing down. And so I just want to put that out there.
It means some things are going to go easier for you than others,
Mm-hmm.
If I call the police are going to interact with me very differently than if I was a Black man. But, they're also going to interact with me very differently if I'm a gay guy in a bar. I go back to Audre Lorde a lot because she says there's no hierarchy of oppression. And she's right. But we have to acknowledge that in some respects, the color of my skin is going to affect my life differently. Now, I can use that privilege well and use that privilege as we did with the Black Lives Matter meeting, to say like, oh, they're not going to cancel my show. And I'm working at a place where it's a bunch of pinko liberals who will take everybody anyway. But how can we stand in solidarity with people that don't have the same privileges? How can their concerns become our concerns? I think is the bigger. I continually feel like my work as an artist and my work as a writer is just about extending empathy. And it's the thing that these shows have done, certainly for me as a person, but I think also for an audience who's been part of them, that I continually ask them to step into a place of empathy for other people that they may not agree with.
I mean, one way I've also noticed you doing that in the meeting is when the board welcomes new members.
Oh, sure.
Especially the members who are part of the larger queer community that maybe mainstream queer communities like, they're not quite queer enough, or, they're not on the same page as us, like Caitlyn Jenner, or...
Oh, sure.
I was just rewatching, getting ready for this interview, some of your videos last night, and you had mentioned Barry Manilow finally coming out, right?
Yeah.
And so really, I think that's one of the ways that you also bring the empathy in, is like, we have to welcome everyone no matter what they've done or what they haven't done.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't have to, even I was congratulated Mayor Pete had dropped out, and he had also had, by the time I did the last show, Mayor Pete had dropped out, but he'd also had this moment with a 9-year-old boy coming out and saying, I want to be brave like you. And I had my disagreements with Mayor Pete. I was, it's thrilling to see that a gay candidate made it as far. I did not think I would see that in my lifetime nationally, but it's thrilling. And I understand why people got into it. I think, you should read a little bit more, but I'm a serious socialist. So I disagree with Mayor Pete. But, I kind of made one little joke at his expense, which I do at everybody's expense, certainly my own, and really thanked him for being a groundbreaking person, and which he is. There is a great deal of pride that he stood up on a stage and was unapologetically himself. That is incredible. I did not expect. I'm grateful to him for that. I disagree with him for other things, but on that level, I can at least say thank you for that.
Thank you, Mayor Pete.
Thank you, Mayor Pete. That's probably the last one you're getting, but good luck to you.
So you alluded to your book about gay culture coming out, which I believe is the Gay BCs. Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So in the 2 years that I had not done the meeting, I always get a lot of emails and messages from young people who are like, I don't know any of the things you know. I want to know why Joan Crawford's important. I want to know why Betty Davis means anything to me. I want to know, what are gay books that you read and that you love. And it's very strange to me that I've become that elder, because I think, I moved to New York in 1999 and I didn't have that. There were no real mentors for me. And I say that with a heavy heart. The community had been decimated by the AIDS crisis, and they had the cocktail at that point for about 3 or 4 or 5 years at that point. And people were starting to live longer, and it was a readjustment from years and years of fighting and watching so many countless people die. And I think that, the people that were left were in their own state of kind of PTSD and shock. And the thought of, teaching me about gay culture at 18 was not an appealing enterprise for them. So I think, with a lot of people of my generation, we really started this pursuit of what were the things we missed out on? Who were these mentors that were gone? You look at projects, Dan Fishback, I think, wrote a play about it years ago. I've written about it. Leo Herrera has this Fathers Project right now, which is all about what if the AIDS crisis didn't happen. But there was there is a profound sadness in, I think, the people of my generation, because we are fully aware of all the people that we lost. And we are aware of the great mentors and artists that we could have been participating with. My friends kind of joke that, like, if he had lived, I'd probably be sweeping up the theater of the ridiculous now for Charles. Like, I'd be there. I'd be making art with him. And unfortunately, that he was one of the victims of this terrible disease. So getting these letters and now kind of being some sort of authority on gay culture was a very strange thing. But I started doing these shows and saying, here's what I know. Here are the people I know. Here's the research I've done. Here are the interesting things I've found out. There are things I don't know, but here's what I got. And that was seen by some lovely people at Chronicle Books, and they said, why don't you write a book about it? So I spent most of last year writing essentially a dictionary of queer culture and trying to not only write about this past, this camp past, but to also really talk about people who were still making work, people who were, sorry for all the dinging, to talk about people who were still making work, who had continued to make work, young people who were coming up and making work, so that it didn't feel like, oh, you missed out on queer culture. It's still here. We're still making it. We're still figuring it out. There's a continual kind of influx of people that are making work that is dealing with not only your lives, but your sensibility. And that's been it's been an arduous task, I can assure you. And I'm worried. I mean, the book starts out with an apology, just because I know the game now. And when I say game, I say, we're still fighting so much for representation. We're still fighting so much to be seen, that I understand that, tempers and egos run high, and that people get really upset when, the wrong word is used and because they know that the fight is real to even be seen. I think we have to, but like the meeting, I'm so sorry. I'm never so busy in my whole life. Like the meeting, I think we have to kind of give people the benefit of the doubt a little bit more. It's not that we have to stop calling out folks, but it's simply that we have to remember who's on our side and who isn't. Some people are slow with language. Some people are slow with identity politics, certainly. But overall, they're people that mean a lot to this community. And I think we have to kind of make space for them to catch up a little bit. So the book was really a collection of all the people that I thought were making, really important work and were part of a culture that I consider myself part of now. So it's coming out hopefully this year, hopefully. Well, everything's a little bit on hold, but it's a book that I'm proud of, that there'll be, at least for this moment, there will be a tome where you can go and say, oh, there's Vaginal Davis and Benny Davis right next to each other.
Or they can bring it to the meeting when they don't know what you're talking about. They're like, wait, let me look that up.
Exactly. They can look it up, chapter and verse. I can tell them it's on page this,
I think I'm a couple years older than you, and even I will admit that especially some of the camp stuff from old movies and that kind of thing, that's never really been something that I've been interested in personally. And so sometimes those references, don't really a little bit fall on my own flat ears sometimes. And so even just having something like that to look up, could be helpful. But, I've also done my own educating of younger people as well, in terms of just the kind of things that I've sought out or that I have gotten access to, arriving in San Francisco in the late 90s and still, the AIDS epidemic still happening, and a lot of people were gone. And it really there was my own personal coming out process, and the people that I met took a while before I encountered people who were around in the 80s and the 70s and that kind of thing, and being able to have my own queer education from them too. So I look forward to what this book will bring.
Yeah, it's fascinating because Fran Lebowitz said it best, I think. She said, the thing that we always remember about kind of queer art makers is like, oh, we lost all these great artists, but you also lost a great audience. You lost people who, real opera queens who had gone and seen Maria Callas at the last time and, had all those opera recordings and people who were fascinated by the ballet. And, you lost a whole group of people who were really that hoarded that knowledge so specifically. And I think that's the new, it is a loss on all fronts because there was not a lot of people to pass it on. And I feel really lucky, and I hope the book does justice to it, to be able to pass on some of it and say, hey, here's, run with it. Go find out the rest.
And the people who we didn't lose in the audience who are still alive and cooking, those experiences bring up memories of trauma. And so it can be hard for them to just be with what comes up. And so I think sometimes a lot of people, they just avoid those things because it triggers those memories.
Yeah, I understand. It's also weird to see, I know a lot of people that know Marsha P. Johnson, knew her very well. And it's very strange to them to see their friend kind of sainted by people who didn't know her and in some ways used in ways that she was not, the person that she was not. I was listening to a young person tell me that Marsha P. Johnson started the Stonewall riots. And I was like, no, she didn't. And I have audio to prove it. But okay, that's what, I think that, we're still kind of sorting out how to keep this culture alive and keep it vibrant and keep it in an organic place, because that's where it's always been, that it is community based, that it is, a friend took me to my first Kiki and Herb show. And that meant something because I was being invited into some world that I was eventually going to be a bigger part of. But it's those kind of things that I think even writing the book was a real lesson to me of like, oh, how I want to show people this person, what I want people to know about Judy Garland, for instance. It was a real chance to kind of talk about those people in a loving way and hopefully pass on some information.
Mm-hmm. So, Justin, as we start to wind down, I always end the show with the same question for my guests, which is, can you share with us a person, practice, or experience that has supported your queer spirit to flourish?
Well, I probably have two, I think. I always actually have it on my desk. Even though I'm in upstate New York, I still carry it. So when I was in college, I was studying theater, and I had some friends who we were all going to go and get summer stock jobs. And I said to them very freely, we're never going to have a chance. I thought we were just going to work forever. And I thought we're never going to have a chance to just be kids again. This is kind of our last kids summer. Why don't we go to the beach, get shitty jobs, and drink and have fun at the beach all summer? And I had some friends, and they were like, that sounds fun. We're never going to get to do that. So we went to Ocean City, Maryland. We got shitty jobs and worked all summer. And out of everybody, they were all kind of contented and happy. And I was furious that I wasn't making theater because it was already making me crazy. And I went to a bookstore, and there was a biography on Eva Le Gallienne, who was an actress and a producer and translator, did all these things, and also an openly queer woman. She'd been born in 1899. She died in 1991. And she had never married, never pretended to be anything else but what she was. And I read that book, I think, in a week, less than a week. And she became this kind of guiding star for me throughout my life. So I have little things of hers all over my apartment. I've collected things of hers. And she was the great lesson of, I think so often as queer people, especially even in theater, you're told that you're not commercial, your expression is not what is important. So much of theater, even when I was training, was about covering up. To be gay was to seem effeminate. And even though gay people, are the cornerstone of American theater, there was still a kind of second class feeling that I took up on. And to read about somebody who so easily for themselves charted their own course, that knew that their own way of doing things was going to be the best way for them, and in doing so changed the face of the American theater, was something that just kind of hit me. And I have a signed card that says "All good wishes, Eva Le Gallienne," that I carry everywhere I go, because she's become such a cornerstone for me of somebody, just a guardian angel to watch over you and say, keep making, because it's vitally important for gay queer artists to be seen, to be heard, to be celebrated, and for them to make work that is about this community. And she's somebody that I celebrate a lot. And she's been a big thing. I think the other thing that I would say is, I talk about coming up with the meeting at the Radical Fairies, but the Radical Fairies were and continue to be a big part of my life. And I say that because I had, they were a healing instrument for me, because coming up in the gay community as I had in the time that I did, and also seeing the kind of, I don't know, I have this theory now that I keep thinking about. I was recently at a wedding and I saw this little effeminate boy, and he was kind of delightful. And I looked at him and watched him and was delighted by him, but remembered that everyone I know was probably like that. All my friends were this cute little, sweet little boy who was sensitive and soft. And so much in our life happens to make us not that, and so much of that is a pressure that we put on ourselves to not be that. We want to be these masculine he-men that everybody wants to sleep with. We want to be hard and tough. And I want to go back to the softness, because I think that's our greatest gift. And even as I get older, I concentrate on the ways in which I can remain soft, remain loving, remain open, and celebrate that in myself. Because I think that as a gay person, that's my greatest gift, is that I get to maintain that if I take good care of it, and if I take good care of it in other people.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's really important. I'm actually reading Jacob Tobias's book, Sissy, right now, and they illustrate that point very clearly from their own experience. And it's stirring up a lot of old memories for me from my teenage years and childhood reading that. So.
Oh, sure. It's a journey, certainly, but I think getting back to that softness is the way to do it. It's the continual process for me.
Well, Justin, can you share with people where they can find you and learn more about your work and your events coming up?
Oh, sure. So I'm on Facebook as Justin Elizabeth Sayre, on Instagram as Justin Elizabeth Sayre, on Twitter as Justin Liz Sayre, because I couldn't fit it all in. And I have a website, justinsayre.com, which people can go to as well. So there's lots of ways to keep in touch and keep up with everything. I hopefully will have more work to show this year, lots of projects. And yeah, stop by anytime. And I'm very personable. Drop me a line. I usually try to answer.
All right. Well, I will have those links in the show notes for people as well.
Okay, great.
So I just have to ask before I let you go, does the board have any rulings they want to announce today?
Oh, just stay safe and listen, we're a people that are meticulously clean, so I think we'll get through the washing our hands. And a lot of us, we're indoor kids, so I'm sure this is really a vacation for a lot of you. But stay safe, really, and not only stay safe, but really try to think of other people. There's going to be a lot of people suffering financially, emotionally. This is the time that we've been through things like this before. We know how to take care of each other. And I think it is the great lesson that we can teach the world at this point, of the great ways in which the queer community takes care of its own. We have to extend that umbrella even further right now and look out for a lot of people. And I think we can do it.
And for those of you listening to this in the far future, we are speaking of the coronavirus. So
yeah, hopefully you're already out.
Exactly.
Hopefully you're out and this is a distant memory. But for those of us trapped in this time, we're here.
Well, Justin, thank you for being here. It was a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you so much. This has been great. Thank you.
I work with many queer folks who struggle to get their needs met or who suffer from having their boundaries violated by others. Because you may not have been cared for the best, you might have a hard time identifying your needs. Or because you have been violated or bullied, you might not completely understand where exactly your boundaries are. If you'd like some help exploring your needs and building more resilient boundaries, head over to my website and download the free guide, Needs, Boundaries, and Self-Care Support for Queer Folk. This is a short introduction to help you start to shift and change your relationship to yourself and others, and to feel more safe and resourced day to day. So just head over to queerhealingjourneys.com/needs to download your free guide today. To find the resources we discussed today, find the show notes at thequeerspirit.com. And if you enjoyed the show, remember to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. This will help us reach and support more queer people all over. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.